Okay, so this is just a really simplified tea ceremony. Not ceremony, I guess, but you don't have to have a lot of stuff to enjoy your tea. Just to show you the things you need at bare minimum. Your tea, of course. If you have a packed tea like this, you'll want a tea knife or a tea pick to pick it apart with. You don't have to have one. You can just use, oh, I put that in the focus for you. You can just use, I might go slightly sharp, but you can just use a butter knife or something to pry the tea apart with. But it does, of course, come loose if it's not aged pu'er tea, but ripe pu'er tea instead. You'll want, of course, a smaller pot or vessel for steeping your tea in. So this is one that I use a lot. And you'll definitely want something smaller than what you usually use for other teas. You could also go with a gaiwan, one of these, instead of a using teapot. Or this is another size teapot that I have. So they tend to be pretty small for pu'er teas, so you can reuse the leaves and get a lot out of them. And of course you'll want a little filter so that when you put it in another vessel, you don't want to leave the water steeping over the leaves after it's already brewed. You can filter the leaves out. And your cup for drinking it out of course. Alright, so what you'll do is you'll take your packed tea. This one I've dug into not too elegantly. And you take your tea knife or tea pick. You try to find kind of a looser edge to put it into. If it's coming with a little bit too much resistance to get it under a bit of the tea, you want to prod around and find another bit until you work your way around to the tighter packed part. That way you don't break up your tea leaves too bad, as I am here. I don't quite have the art of this down yet. Usually what I do is break a good bit off at a time and store it in a different container loose. Alright, so I found a bit of a looser bit on the front side here. So what I'm doing is putting the tea pick in, angling towards the same area a few times. And then you just kind of pry it a little bit. To get more of a solid chunk off. And bits of leaves are falling off of this cake for me. And with this cake, this is from Minghai or Dai tea factory. They're an older one, to prove the authenticity of the cakes. Some factories like this will put a bit of a paper or mark just in the top layer of the tea before they compress it, just to kind of discourage people making cheap tea and claiming that it's from the better-known tea factory. Alright, so I've got a good bit there. You may not want to break off that much tea, just for one pot, especially depending on the type of teapot that you have. So for example, for a high glazed teapot or gaiwan like this, you're not losing a lot of flavor into this pot, so you won't want to use quite as much as you do with an aging teapot like this. With this one, the clay hasn't been seasoned as much as I want it to get a strong flavor from a more normal amount of tea. So I do put a bit more tea leaves in it than you might a highly glazed teapot that won't soak up the flavor of the tea. Soaking up the flavor isn't a bad thing. It seasons the pot so that over time it adds a good characteristic to the tea. Once it soaks up enough flavor, it'll definitely start giving back to the different teas that you brew in it. Alright, so you definitely want to put at least enough in to cover the bottom of the teapot. Hold on, I'm going to try to get some light on that. Just a moment, there'll be some more light. Here we go, phone flashlight. Alright, so as you can see, if this were laying flat, it would just cover the bottom of the teapot. You don't want to go too skimpy on covering the bottom. Maybe if you have your teapot about just a little less than a quarter of the height of the teapot filled with leaves, that would be good. And this is a little bit less than I usually go with, so I do have some broken off already that I'm actually going to grab and add to this teapot a bit more instead of taking the time to break more off. This is the kind of vessel I usually use to store tea leaves I've already broken off in a more bulk session in. Just nice unglazed clay so the clay can breathe and still have the tea get some air. You don't have to have one of these. Alright, and putting this aside for a moment. When you put your tea away again, front of the wrapping paper, we'll put it down in the center, and when you get it, there will be this kind of divot in the back of the tea. So you just fold the paper over. And then just press it down and put your tea away like that. Alright, so brewing the tea. One thing you might want to do, you don't have to have a fancy tea table, but one thing a lot of people like to do to kind of rinse a bit of the dust off of the tea is the first time you pour hot water over the tea, leave it for no more than 5 seconds or so, just to open up the leaves a little bit, get them starting to open up, and also rinse the dust off. We don't usually drink that first time you steep the tea. And as I was saying, you don't have to have a tea tray for this that you can dump your tea into. You can just grab a mug or beaker or cup or something to just dump the tea out into. It's just extra. Alright, so I spent about 5 seconds. Now this is a tea tray that has a bottom that's meant for wastewater and extra tea that you can dump out after you're done using. So I am going to use that in this case, but as I said, a normal mug or something will do to rinse that first bit of tea out into. Alright, and now for the first actual bit of tea I'm going to drink. And I overfilled it a little bit. You can see it's kind of coming off of the spout there. So you'll want to be conscious of the shape of the lid of your teapot if you don't have a tea tray, and mindful of how much room it's going to take up. Now for the first time I steep, I'll usually only leave it for about 20 to 30 seconds. And tea leaves are meant to be reused multiple times to have multiple little pots of tea in the same sitting. Usually I add about 10 or 15 seconds more each time I brew the leaves again. And I'll do that for until maybe the third or the fourth time. It depends on the tea that I have and how old it is. The older ones I have will last for more steepings, and as you go 10 or more seconds or so isn't going to keep much of a flavor going with the tea, so I'll kind of lengthen that in increments. The more I get up there, maybe adding 20 or 30 seconds after a couple steepings. Alright, but I've got what, if you're drinking tea with multiple people, is a fair cup. But something to decant the tea into, because you don't want the excess tea still steeping as you're trying to drink the first bit of it. Ooh, I splashed a bit there. Alright, so the filter, of course, catches extra bits of gunk, well, not gunk, but extra little broken bits of tea and whatnot that will come out of the teapot inevitably as you pour it. Alright, so putting my teapot aside. Now you just pour and enjoy your tea. Usually I get a couple of cups out of each pot that I brew or steep. And I do have a teeny bitty little white cup I usually never use, but to show you the color of the tea after it's been brewed or steeped. I cannot keep Western terminology out of my tea. Alright, so as you can see, this nice, not too dark amber color for a ripe tea, so that is a tea that's been aged naturally. It hasn't been processed for kind of that dark, more reddish color that ripe pu'ers get. Most often the loose pu'er teas you'll get at conventional tea stores, Teavana, places like that. Those will be processed ripe pu'ers. And those are the ones that, since they've been left to sit and dampened instead of aging and processing dried, they'll get kind of that dank mustiness to them. I haven't experimented that much with ripe pu'ers over raw pu'ers like this. I have heard good things about them, but I haven't found one I like as much as I like my raw pu'ers. And some benefits you can get out of the whole thing when you start giving it some time. If you do, make sure to drink out of a smaller cup, not necessarily teeny tiny like this one. Had my hand in your way there. Not necessarily teeny tiny like this one, but at least 50 to 70 milliliter cups. That also makes sure that you slow down to enjoy the taste of the tea and the effect of it. When you start drinking it, sometimes you can get kind of a tingly sensation on your tongue or your mouth. It'll leave you salivating after you drink it as you process the tea, kind of a saccharine sweet taste in your mouth after it, even after the aftertaste. And one thing that I found with more experience, after I was drinking the tea for 6 or 7 months or so, on a regular basis, I tend to try to drink the pu'er every night. It kind of has an instant meditation quality to it. Different teas will have different kind of subtle bodily effects. You'll feel your muscles relax and be heavy with some, or a little bit tingly. Sometimes you can feel a warm, kind of heavy sensation in your stomach. Just kind of like that sensation. It's might be described if you try to go through a guided meditation or something like that. Other ones will have more of an energizing effect, but definitely give it a try, and if you give it some time, it will give a lot back to you.